MMT, more money today. All you have to do is just print, and everybody's happy. Oh my gosh, what a wonderful life. It's never been successful for very long. Just figure out what they know a lot about and put their money there. Right. Don't listen to somebody on the television. Right. If I say to you, I own silver, don't go off and buy silver. Do not listen to hot tips.
不動産投資を学ぶなら、楽町。ファーストロジック。
In the second part, we discussed what we should invest in to prepare for the Japan end scenario becoming a reality, and we were able to hear Mr. Rogers' views on the future of the U.S.-Japan or U.S.-China confrontation. The future of the U.S.-China hegemony struggle, the 21st century, will be China's century. In the first part, we discussed the scenario of the Japanese economy collapsing and all assets crashing. Mr. Rogers, what is your outlook on the U.S. economy?
Well, first of all, I hope to be clear. I don't expect the Japanese economy to collapse anytime soon, certainly not in 2024. So you don't have to worry yet.
Okay.
You know,
we have a couple of years.
Things are fine right now in Japan, and I love Japan, and I hope it's okay. Now, we do know that the U.S. is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, and the debt is just astonishing how high it keeps going. And history shows that countries that get into that problem start having problems. We had a bear market, a declining market in 2008 because of too much debt. Maya, since 2009, the debt everywhere has skyrocketed. So the next time we have a problem in the U.S., it's got to be the worst in my lifetime because the debt is so very, very high. Now, that will cause, if the U.S. has a problem, everybody has a problem, including China. Often when this kind of thing happens, countries start trade wars. They blame it on the foreigners. The politicians come and say, you're wonderful Japanese people. It's not your fault. It's the evil foreigners. It's the foreigners that cause this problem. And so they start doing things to damage the foreigners or protect the locals. Trade wars, for instance, special tariffs, everything they try. We tried it throughout history, and that's what will happen. The U.S. is a gigantic debtor, so we will hurt ourselves more than we will hurt the Chinese and the world, but we will certainly hurt the Chinese. And unfortunately, throughout history, when people start trade wars, they often wind up in shooting wars. They don't always have to. They don't necessarily do. But when people start blaming the foreigners, emotions arise, and as things get bad, it's very easy to say, it's those evil foreigners. It's those horrible foreigners. That's the problem. And it often leads to a shooting war. I'm just reciting history to you. Anybody can read history if they want to. And economic problems, especially with nations that have big debt situations or fundamental problems, often wind up in shooting problems. I'm not predicting it, I'm just telling you some history.
So right now, it's not like we're seeing, the decline of the U.S. or anything, because, for example, GAFAM, like Google and Apple and Facebook, these companies are really the biggest companies in the world, and I think they're really the center of world economy, and they're still generating a lot of profit.
The American stock market's making all-time highs. I was just talking to you. I'm not suggesting this is going to happen in July or August. I'm just telling you what is building up, and what builds up. Sure, we can all say, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. Well, okay, I'm not worried. But I do have to look down the road, down the calendar. Look at your calendar and figure out what's going to happen in the future.
How do you think the next elections will affect the U.S. economy?
Well, I hope we have one. We always have. if we don't have an election, I can tell you it's going to be disaster in the American economy and in the American stock market. It looks like we're going to have an election, fortunately, and somebody's going to win. And whoever wins, it will be those friends will do well.
Right.
So if you know who's going to win, find out who his or her friends are, and that's where you should be investing your money.
Right. Do you have a preference over who you would want to be the next president?
I will not vote for either of those two. It's very rare that America has good candidates.
I see. Okay.
In history.
Do you have voting rights in Singapore?
You mean in Singapore?
In Singapore.
No, I cannot vote in Singapore elections.
Okay, I see.
But I can vote in American elections.
Oh, right.
Absentee. It's called absentee voting.
Right. So how will the U.S.-China hegemony struggle develop, and what do you think the outcome of that might be?
Well, I can just tell you what's always happened. Whenever you've had a dominant power, and especially when it's stagnating, and you've had a rising power, they have often clashed. Not always. They don't have to. It doesn't have to be a bad clash. But often in history, they've clashed. And as I look around, I can see you already have American politicians blaming all of our problems on the Chinese, the evil, evil, evil Chinese. Fortunately, at the moment anyway, China's been more restrained so far. Let's hope somebody is restrained. But history, if you were just reading history, you would say there's going to be a struggle between the U.S. and China. Hopefully it will just be a trade war, but trade wars have a habit of turning into shooting wars. Human beings are the same, have been for hundreds of years.
When you say shooting war, what do you mean in detail?
Well,
like shooting,
you have armies shooting at each other, and you have navies sinking
military
ships.
Okay, I see.
When I say shooting, I mean they're shooting bullets.
Okay,
and bombs at each other.
Like a war kind of situation.
Yes, it's not water guns. It's real bullets, real bullets and real bombs.
Right. So with China-Japan relationships, Japanese people do not really support the view that China will be the next hegemonic power. And I think a lot of Japanese hope that the U.S. will stay dominant. And they do not believe that China will be the next big power.
Well, I mean, I look around. You can say the U.S. will stay on top, and I will say, okay, but no country that has gotten such gigantic debts ever in history has stayed on top. Now, if the Japanese say I'm wrong, it's not the first time people have told me I'm wrong. I told you about my first wife. Oh my gosh, what a horrible mistake. But if people think that the U.S. can stay on top, despite the gigantic debts, okay, but no country in history, no country in history has ever been able to do that. Now, I'm quite happy if the Japanese say I'm wrong. I don't mind. I don't know who they think it's going to be. Maybe they think the U.S. is going to stay on top forever. Hooray. History would indicate that that's not going to be the case.
The Chinese real estate bubble doesn't seem to be resolving soon. Do you think there are any signs of improvement in the Chinese real estate scene?
Well, the Chinese real estate bubble was gigantic. It was one of the biggest bubbles in history anywhere. They tried to pop it for a long time, unsuccessfully. Now, for whatever reason, it has popped. It was huge, and so it's going to take a long time for the damage to be corrected. But, I mean, it seems to, and the Japanese stock market is certainly, the Chinese stock market is certainly down a lot. I am trying to find some Chinese shares to buy.
Okay.
Haven't found any yet, but my experience is that when a major country has a big problem, it doesn't last forever. something eventually sorts itself out. China is one of the few countries in the world now where I am looking for investment because everybody else is booming. I mean, the Japanese stock market's at an all-time high after being down for 35 years. Most countries, the U.S. is all-time highs. I would try to find something that's down, and other than China and Uzbekistan, nearly everything else is high.
In particular, what kinds of investments would you be looking in China? Real estate or stocks?
No,
or
I would try to find something that's depressed, travel, tourism. These are things that are very, very depressed in China. And so I would try to find things, not property. I know property is depressed, but with property, you really have to know exactly what you're doing, and you have to really go and look.
Right.
And I'm too lazy, too dumb, something, so I'm not doing that.
Okay. Uzbekistan, what is special about this country?
Most people don't know Uzbekistan is a country. Most people couldn't find it on a map. I've been to Uzbekistan 4 or 5 times, for what that's worth. Uzbekistan is in the middle of Asia. It's got successful neighbors. It has a history that has been extremely successful at times. Have you heard of Tamerlane?
No.
Okay, well, a few hundred years ago, Mr. Tamer, his name was Tamer, but then he went lame, and so they named him Tamer the Lame, Tamerlane. He conquered most of the world. You're Japanese. You know the Japanese word kamikaze?
Yes.
You know where it comes from?
No.
I know you don't. Most people don't. But a few hundred years ago, a lot of ships, Mr. Tamerlane sent a lot of ships to invade Japan, and a gigantic typhoon came in and blew them all away, and they sank. And that is kamikaze.
Really?
Hey,
That's where it comes from.
Don't believe me, I'm a foreigner. You know, we don't, I know Japanese don't like foreigners, but
No, I didn't
look
know
it
that.
up. Mr. Tamerlane conquered most of the world,
Okay.
and he was all set to conquer the Chinese, were all set to conquer Japan, and along came a typhoon. Along came a kamikaze and blew them all away and saved Japan. I don't know how we got off on that, but there have been times when Mr. Tamer conquered everything from Europe to Asia at one time in history. It was an extremely successful country. Went into decline. The Soviets took it over. The Soviets ruined it, as you can imagine. The Soviets ruined everything. I will tell you an interesting story if you have time. When they buried Mr. Tamer, they buried him in Uzbekistan, and on the tomb, there was a big sign that says, "Here lies Tamerlane, and if anyone disturbs this tomb, it will bring chaos to the world." The sign, right there, it said it. The Soviets, Soviet archaeologists, in 1941, decided to go into the tomb and see what was there. And they went in, 1941. That was the day that Mr. Hitler invaded Russia. So it was true.
What a coincidence.
Well, Mr. Tamer wouldn't say it was a coincidence.
Right.
Mr. Tamer says, "I told you so.
Right.
I warned you. I gave you warning in writing." But it's a coincidence of history. But Uzbekistan and Mr. Tamer were extremely successful a few hundred years ago. They have a lot of natural resources. It was ruined by the Soviets, but now they're trying to start over again, and they're running the country. Will they succeed? I don't know. I'm just telling you. It might be a cheap stock market.
So they have a stock market. I didn't even know that. But all countries usually have a stock market, so.
Miss Maya, where have you been?
Where have I been?
My God.
This is the place to check out.
I have to take you down to Ginza, get you some sake.
No, I think you need to take me to Uzbekistan to see what's out there.
Oh, I don't think your husband would say yes. I doubt if your parents would say yes.
Okay, I see.
収益物件数ナンバーワン、不動産投資を始めるなら、楽待アプリ、楽待で検索。
Okay, Mr. Rogers, final section. Based on all that we've discussed, the biggest question here is how should we prepare for the future? What would you do if you were Japanese now?
If I were Japanese, I would move.
Okay, that's
That
really...
was a joke. That was a
No,
joke.
no, no,
That
no,
was a
no.
joke.
I'm going to take that very seriously because actually, after reading your book, I have started thinking about that. Your book has really influenced me and my life beyond.
Well, you should think about it. You are Japanese. You're smart, educated, successful. You should think about it. Don't take my word for anything. Just get out the numbers and say, wait a minute. The population is declining. The debt is going up. What will be the answer 20 years from now? And if you can add, and I know you can add and subtract, you will say, uh-oh, this is going to be a problem. And then you will have to decide what to do. Maybe you will buy a farm and farm rice. I don't know what you will do. Or maybe you will move to Portugal. Who knows what you will do? I'm going to tell you another story. I hate to keep interrupting. In 1938, remember, we talked about 1941.
Right, I remember.
Right, but this is 38.
Okay, 10
There
years
was a
before.
guy in Paris who said, oh my gosh, this is all going to be a disaster. I'm getting out because I can see that Europe is going to wind up in flames with a huge war. He's sitting in Paris. He got out his globe. He looked around all around the world, and he found an isolated island in the South Pacific. And he went there to escape the coming disaster. The name of that isolated place was Guadalcanal, which became the site of one of the longest and bloodiest battle in the Pacific War. So he was a genius, and it ruined him. It destroyed him. So, he saved himself, yes. He went to the site of the worst battle in the Pacific War.
Okay, I see.
So you have to be careful.
Okay.
You don't have to be very careful. So if you go to Uzbekistan, be careful if you go to Tamerlane's tomb. Don't break in.
Right.
Don't try to break in. But you can add and subtract, as I said. You figure out what's going to happen in Japan in the next 30 or 40 years. I know you have at least 40 more years to live. Do you have children?
No, I don't. Maybe it's good. I can, or maybe that's a bad thing because I'm not really helping the population problem in Japan right now.
Well, that's another discussion,
Right.
which we're not going to have now. It's another long discussion. When we go to Ginza to have sake, we can discuss it then. But I will tell you, the only thing the Japanese can do is figure out what they know a lot about and put their money there.
Right.
Don't listen to somebody on the television.
Right.
If I say to you, I own silver, don't go off and buy silver unless you know a huge amount about silver. You should put your assets where you yourself know a lot about. Don't listen to other people. Well, do not listen to hot tips, no matter who you are and where you are. Stay with what you yourself know a lot about. And that's the way you will survive, maybe. If I told you to buy something and it goes up, you wouldn't know what to do. You don't know why you own it.
Right.
If it goes down, if it goes down, you know what to do. You'll say, that's Jim Rogers. It's his fault.
Right.
You'll blame it on me. But you won't know what to do because you don't know why you bought it.
Right.
So stay with what you yourself know a lot about. If I told you, Maya, you can only have 25 investments in your life, you would be very careful You wouldn't jump in and out of hot tips,
Mm-hmm.
and you would probably survive and be a successful investor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my answer to you. Do not listen to hot tips. Maybe from Maya, maybe from her show, but otherwise, stay away from hot tips. Stay with what you know.
Excellent advice.
I know it is, but we'll see.
So there are a lot of successful, wealthy Japanese people who are moving to Singapore and moving to Dubai. Are these smart choices, in your opinion?
Please tell them to go to Dubai. Stay away from Singapore. Singapore is getting crowded.
It is.
Too
Too
many
crowded.
foreigners. Go to Dubai. Go to Dubai. Well, everybody has to make their own decision.
Right.
I repeat.
Uh-huh. That's
Yes,
amazing.
I moved to Singapore because Singapore had something I needed, or I thought I needed.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the reason I'm here is because I wanted my children to speak Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And so we moved to Singapore so that they would speak Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
That has worked. But everybody has to make up their own decision.
Right.
I mean, if you love the sun and you love the beach, you might think about somewhere else.
Right.
Lots of places with things that you might love.
Mm-hmm.
But please, and this is extremely important,
Major
many
owners.
people throughout history have moved away from their native land. They're Japanese living all over the world. If you're going to succeed and survive, go to a place that you know a lot about and love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way you will survive. I love Japan, but I'm not going to move there. I don't speak Japanese. I want my children to speak Chinese.
Uh-huh.
You get me a Japanese wife, maybe I'll move to Japan and she can teach me Japanese. Unlikely. But everybody has to figure out on their own what they love. And if you look around the world, throughout history, you'll see huge numbers of people have immigrated and left their own country, including huge numbers of Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Brazil, there are millions of Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
You go many places, you will find smart, successful Japanese. Or stay in Japan. I told you that people will say, we don't care. We'd rather not live in another country. We want to live in our Japan.
Mm-hmm.
We want to have unagi. We want to have sake. We want to ski. We want
Right.
to ski in the north. So everybody has to make their own decision. But remember, Britain in 1924 was the richest, most powerful country in the world. 50 years later, they couldn't pay their bills. I was in England in the 60s as a student. I could see huge chaos, many problems everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I was a student, but I could see what was happening everywhere. That will happen to Japan, even in your lifetime,
Right.
as smart and young as you are.
初めての不動産投資、先輩大家さんに相談したい。不動産投資の悩みを気軽に相談するなら、楽町相談室。楽町で検索。
Mr. Rogers.
Okay. Hi.
Hi. 3 additional questions, if that's okay with you.
Of course it's okay.
Thank you so much. So the first one is regarding the US dollar and Japanese yen exchange rate. Do you have an idea of what that might become to? Like $1 is currently maybe about 150 yen. Do you have any predictions on?
You're a young woman, but I can remember when it was 300, over 300
Yeah.
to the US dollar.
Yes.
You couldn't remember that, but and that's when Japan was in much better shape in those days.
Mm-hmm.
So why can't the Japanese yen go much, much lower? And it will,
Mm-hmm.
because the debt goes higher,
Right.
population goes down. I love Japan, I will tell you again, but I don't see anything that's going to change the direction
Mm-hmm.
of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you know something, but I have not been able to find it yet.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the debt goes up every day.
Mm-hmm.
The population goes down every week. So you tell me.
Mm-hmm. And then what do you think about the Nikkei index?
Well, I told you, I owned it, and I was happy. And it went up a lot, and I sold it. I sold it too soon. So what do I know? I sold it too soon.
Okay.
I made money, but I sold too soon. What I do know, Maya, is that at times like this, after a market's been down for long, long decades, and it starts moving up, and there's a lot of money being printed and government buying, it usually goes up longer than anybody expects, including me, and it often turns into a bubble. So I would expect to be a very delicious bubble in Japan. I remember the 1989-90 bubble. It was unbelievable, unbelievable. You're going to see it again in Japan, if you ask me. But unless you're very good at handling bubbles, be very careful. Because bubbles always end very badly. And somebody always hurts and suffers. Be careful.
Thank you so much.
Smart as you are, be careful.
Second question is regarding the MMT theory or MMT, modern money theory. Can we hear your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's magic. All you have to do is just print, and everybody's happy. Oh my gosh, what a wonderful life. It's never been successful for very long. But Maya, I will come to Japan and we will go down to Ginza and run up a lot of money. You cannot believe what a good time we're going to have. But we better get out fast because it has never, ever been a successful policy for a long period of time. If you know a place where magic free money, more money today, MMT, more money today. If you know a place where more money today, endless more money today has ever lasted, tell me. But I've never found that place. But politicians throughout history, all over the world, look for an easy answer. Everybody wants the easy answer. I want an easy answer. Oh my gosh. I want an easy answer too, but I haven't found it yet.
And last question is, from what we know, I'm thinking that your investment strategy is to buy cheap or invest when prices are deflated and then sell when those prices increase. And I think a lot of other investors try the same thing, but are not as successful as you are. How do you succeed?
It's wonderful, isn't it? See how easy it is? Just buy low and sell high. Oh, so easy.
Right.
So easy. I'll tell you what's even easier. You watch Maya and you listen to Maya. That's even better and easier. Yes, that's what I try to do. What I try to do is find something that's cheap where there's a positive change taking place. So if I can find cheap and change, I might make some money. But you have to be right. I told you, I'm not going to tell you about my first wife again, that horrible mistake. But if I try to find cheap and a positive change, that is my way, I hope, of successfully investing. But there are other ways, and other people have their own way. So everybody has to find their own way. You're educated, you find your own way.
Today we had a wonderful conversation with Mr. Jim Rogers. Mr. Rogers, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for your interesting insight on the economy today. It was a pleasure talking with you.
I will tell you again, Japan is one of my favorite countries in the whole world. I've been to many places, traveled a lot. I love Japan. I hate to see what's happening because it is one of my favorite countries in the world. The good news is I won't be around when Japan falls apart. I hope. But it's such a wonderful country. You don't know how how wonderful your country is, because just perfect. I hate to see it being ruined.
Thank you so much.
So I'll see you in Ginza, and we'll have some unagi and some sake.
Yes, looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.